Have you ever been up way too late scrolling through the internet when you stumble across a story that starts something like, "My friend told me never to open this file." And before you know it, it's 2 in the morning, every light in your house is on, and somehow your closet door looks a little more suspicious than it did 10 minutes ago. Yeah, we've all been there. The internet has a way of turning the smallest little things into something terrifying. An old photo, a strange video, a game cartridge from a garage sale. Somehow, it all becomes nightmare fuel. These stories have a name. They're called Creepypasta. Now you've heard the word before. Maybe you immediately think of Slender Man, Jeff the Killer, or Ben Drown. But have you ever stopped to wonder where all of this actually came from? Why did millions of people become obsessed with reading scary stories written by complete strangers? And how did a bunch of random internet posts end up creating some of the biggest horror iconics online? So today, we're diving into the strange history of creepypasta, how it started, why it became popular, and why we're all apparently willing to scare ourselves for fun. Hey guys, it's your boy The Hero, and welcome to the Digital Scrub, where we explore the internet's darkest stories, mysteries, unexplained events. Now, let's get into it. Okay, so what is creepypasta? The name itself sounds kind of ridiculous, right? Seriously, if someone asked you what a creepypasta was without any context, you'll probably think it was some haunted Italian dinner, right? Tonight's special is possessed spaghetti. Thankfully, it's not that. The word actually is a combination of creepy and copypasta. So back in the early days of the internet, people used to use the word creepypasta to describe texts that got copied and pasted all over forums, chat rooms, and message boards. Sometimes it was a funny joke, sometimes it was fake news, and sometimes it was a complete nonsense that refused to die. Then people started doing the exact same thing, except with horror stories. So someone would write a creepy story, another person will copy it somewhere else, someone else will repost it, and before long, thousands of people were reading it. That's where the name creepypasta came from. The best part? Most of the stories were written like they actually happened. Instead of saying, "Here's a scary story I made up," they'd be saying something like, "I found this old Nintendo 64 cartridge at a flea market," or "I wasn't supposed to tell anyone what happened in these woods." It mainly made you question whether you were reading a fiction or someone's real experience, and exactly what made them so addictive. Alright, so the internet was a different place. To understand why creepypasta exploded, you kinda have to remember what the internet looked like back then. There is no TikTok, no endless reels, no algorithm deciding what you should watch every 5 seconds. If you wanted entertainment, you had to go looking for it. People spent hours browsing forums, message boards, random websites from designs that looked like they were built in Microsoft Paint. And somehow, those are some of the best websites on the internet. Places like 4chan, Something Awful, Reddit, and dozens of horror forums became the perfect home for creepy stories. Everyone was anonymous, right? Nobody knew who anyone really was, which meant anyone could post a story claiming it was true. One person claimed to find a haunted video game, another talked about hearing voices through a radio, and someone else uploaded blurry pictures or something standing of the woods, right? Looking back now, most of it was obviously fake, but at the time, you weren't completely sure. And honestly, that certainly was half the fun. So, here's what made creepypastas different from traditional horror. They didn't feel like books, they didn't feel like movies, they felt like secrets. The stories were usually written in first person, they sound like someone confessing something they probably shouldn't be talking about. Sometimes they included screenshots, old photographs, video clips, audio recordings, or weird images with absolutely no explanation. Even better, many stories never actually ended. The writer would disappear. The final post would simply stop, or they end up with something like, "If you're reading this, don't go looking for it." Which, of course, made everyone immediately want to go looking for it. Human curiosity is undefeated. So, of course, eventually a few stories became so popular that it escaped the internet. Even people who have never read a creepypasta have probably heard these names. Slender Man, a tall faceless figure that silently watches people from the woods. No screaming, no running, just standing there. Which is somehow even creepier. And there's Jeff the Killer, the smiling face, the phrase "to go to sleep," Whether you loved the story or thought it was completely ridiculous, you definitely remember it. And then came Ben Drown, probably one of the smartest creepypastas ever written. Instead of relying on jump scares, it slowly built the feeling that something inside a video game knew you were there. If you grew up playing Nintendo 64, that story hit differently. There were dozens more, like Smile Dog, the Russian Sleepy Experiment, The Rig, Candle Cove. Each one added something new to the internet horror. Some were generally terrifying, some haven't aged particularly well, and a few, well, let's say they were written by people who probably should have spent a little more time editing before hitting the post. Then internet horror started evolving. As the internet changed, so did creepypasta, right? Writers stopped focusing only on ghosts and monsters. Instead, the internet itself became the monster. Corrupted files, lost television broadcasts, emergency alerts, strange websites, artificial intelligence, forgotten VHS tapes, mysterious YouTube channels. Suddenly, horror wasn't hiding in haunted houses anymore. It was hiding inside your browser. That's why we eventually got things like Analog Horror, ARGs, Mandela Catalog, Local 58, Gemini Home Entertainment, and countless other projects that felt unsettling because they looked almost believable. If classic creepypasta walk, modern internet horror sprinted. So why we still read them? Here's something I've always found interesting. Most of us know these stories aren't real. We know Slender Man isn't waiting behind a tree. We know haunted game cartridges probably aren't even being sold for $5 at a yard sale. Although if someone offered me one, I'd probably still leave it there, just in case. Right? So the reason creepypastas still work isn't because we believe them, it's because they leave room for our imagination. Good horror doesn't explain everything and lets your brain do the work. And your imagination's always scarier than whatever the author could have described. That's why people still revisit these stories today. Not because they're perfect, but because they capture something that modern horror sometimes forgets: the fear of not knowing. So, the next time someone mentions creepypasta, you know it isn't a random scary story. It's a huge part of internet history. It's inspired games, movies, YouTube creators, and analog horror, and honestly, probably a few sleepless nights for an entire generation. Now, I want to hear from you. What was the very first creepypasta you ever read? Was it Slender Man, Jeff the Killer, Ben Drown, Smiling Dog, or was it something that almost nobody remembers anymore? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you got your favorite, there's a good chance I'll end up in a future episode because we're going to be covering a lot of internet horror here on the Digital Scrub. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next dive into the internet's darkest corners. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you find an old game cartridge labeled definitely not haunted, maybe just keep walking.